And welcome, folks, to Truth versus News here on November 19th, in the middle of the big hearings, and are just crazy, called a circus by others and people. So it's just something else. And I just want to start off introducing our Professor Jim Fetzer, the most dangerous man in America, and Scott Bennett, the most pronounced military espionage expert here, knows what he's talking about. Both are authors and great people. And I want to ask him a question. You think what we're seeing here in the media is sedition? So I just wonder, here, sedition is defined as an overt conduct such as speech or organization that tends towards insurrections against an established order. Sedition includes subversion of a constitution and incitement of discontent towards resistance or established authority. A seditionist is one who engages or promotes the interests of sedition. And I just wonder, is that possible to have that in the media? Is the media guilty of sedition now? And so that's my question. Are we aiming that way? Are we there? Or where are we at with that?
Well, we'll see, Don. We'll have to see.
That's our aim for today. Thank you much. Here we go.
All right. Well, we got the Democrats going all in on Schiff impeachment. It's quickly turning into a Schiff show. Unconstitutional, no crimes, only far-left Democrat support. Pretty current, inconsistent with your suggestion of sedition. No crimes that President Trump has committed that would lead to an impeachment inquiry. So Schiff keeps moving the goalposts. More importantly, only far-left Democrats are in favor of impeachment. You can't break the truth. How far it may bend, it remains the truth. Democrats are learning this lesson. It's going to be quite ugly by the time it's over. Speaker Pelosi and her band of socialist Democrats went all in on the impeachment. They've wanted this since prior to the 2017 inauguration. However, they are missing a couple of key points. There must be high crimes, misdemeanors, treason, or robbery. And two, there must be public support. Unfortunately for the Democrats, they have neither. Meanwhile, the event opened Wednesday with two State Department bureaucrats, William B. Taylor, ambassador, and George Kent. It was rather fascinating because Jim Jordan roasted the star witness. He was moved to the Intel Committee by GOP leaders to grill witnesses in the public impeachment, and he does it very, very well. He tore into acting Ukraine Ambassador William Taylor over his testimony whether there was any linkage between withholding funds and the public announcement of an investigation into Joe and Hunter Biden. Jordan noted that during almost 2 months, while U.S. aid to Ukraine was delayed, Taylor met with President Zelensky 3 times, and the hold was never mentioned. That's because there was no linkage. I can't believe, and you're their star witness, you're their first witness, you are the guy, the Ohio Republican said. Taylor testified he first heard on July 18th that aid was being held up. Then it was released on September 11th. But we know from your deposition in those 55 days aid was delayed. You met with Zelensky 3 times, first on July 26th, the day after the famous phone call. Zelensky meets with you, Ambassador Volker, Ambassador Sondland, and again, according to your deposition and your testimony, there was no linkage of security assistance dollars to investigate Burisma or Trump. The questions came after Taylor, the top U.S. diplomat in Ukraine, testified to that his staff, get this, that his staff told him they heard President Trump speaking to Sondland at a restaurant. Speaking to Sondland at a restaurant the day after Trump's July 25th phone call with Zelensky. I mean, this is pathetic. This is below the level of rumor. This is into pure gossip. There was also a meeting on August 27th with Zelensky, Taylor, and then National Security Advisor John Bolton. Still no linkage. Then on September 5th, another meeting between the Ukrainian president, Senator Ron Johnson, and Senator Chris Murphy. Still no linkage. Meanwhile, Devin Nunes' opening statement embarrasses the Democrats as the last people on earth with credibility. Representative Devin Nunes embarrassed House Democrats during his opening statement at Wednesday morning's impeachment hearing. claiming they are the last people on earth with credibility to make accusations against their political opponents. Noonan's barbs were directed at Democrats as a whole, but also specifically House Intel Committee Chair Adam Schiff. After referring to the Russia collusion hoax as a pitiful 3-year-long operation by the Democrats, the corrupt media, and bipartisan bureaucrats to overturn the results of the 2016 election, Noonan suggested the latest whistleblower hearings are nothing more than a sequel. After the spectacular implosion of the Russia hoax on July 24th, where they had spent years denouncing any Republican who ever shook hands with a Russian, on July 25th, they turned on a dime and now claim the real malfeasance is Republicans dealing with Ukraine. Meanwhile, and this is fascinating, Schiff finally releases Tim Morrison testimony where he was the senior director of the NSC, blowing apart the testimony of Schiff's top witness, Lieutenant Colonel Vindman. The NSC Senior Director for European Affairs testified before the Schiff Secret Star Chamber back in October. The transcript of his testimony was finally released this weekend. His testimony completely destroys the latest attempt to remove Trump from office. Worse yet, Morrison's testimony obliterates Schiff's chief witness and reported second whistleblower, Lieutenant Colonel Vindman, who is unreliable and reports to Morrison. This is why Schiff held his secret hearings behind closed doors in a basement. Schiff doesn't want the American public to know that President Trump's phone call with President Zelensky was completely above board. Here are key points in Morrison's testimony. Mr. Morrison did not believe anything improper occurred on the July 25th call. Mr. Morrison testified the memorandum of conversation, a phrase used to describe the call transcript of the July 25th call, was complete and accurate. Mr. Morrison, who listened to the July 25th call, testified that he was not concerned about the substance of what was discussed on the call, only that the transcript might leak. Mr. Morrison was told by National Security Council lawyer John Eisenberg that the July 25th call recording mistakenly ended up on the highly classified system, debunking the Democrats' allegations of an attempted cover-up. Mr. Morrison repeatedly testified that he purposefully kept Lieutenant Colonel Vindman out of the loop on this matter because he had concerns about Vindman's judgment, which are also raised to him by Fiona Hill and others. Mr. Morrison testified that as the final clearing authority for any edits made to the 725 call package, he accepted all of Lieutenant Colonel Vindman's proposed edits. Mr. Morrison testified he does not believe Burisma came up on the call or that anyone suggested edits to the MEMCON to include the word Burisma. Mr. Morrison testified that Lieutenant Colonel Vindman relayed two concerns to him about the July 25th call, that the call did not get into the subject matter they had hoped, and the fidelity of the translation. Mr. Morrison testified that Lieutenant Colonel Vindman never reported to Morrison any of the light queries that he received from Ukrainian officials in August regarding the hold on aid. Mr. Morrison confirmed that President Trump generally does not like foreign aid and specifically held concerns that corruption in Ukraine may cause U.S. aid to be misused. This should end the Democrats' impeachment proceedings. There is no crime. There was no crime. But Democrats continue to lie to the American people about their sham investigation. Democrats will pay for this. Scott, your thoughts?
Well, I was watching some of the Lieutenant Colonel Vindman comments, and I won't grace him again with that title, Lieutenant Colonel, because I don't think he's anything worthy of calling a military officer. I think he's a flat, ugly, fat, stupid imbecile who came in under the Obama administration, as I've seen so many in the high ranks of the Army. And that's the whole ruin of this country, has been regular Army. The special operations, special forces, PSYOP, those people who go into the first, the Rangers, the SEALs, people who go into combat are far different than the regular Army. And the regular Army goes in there and is a parasite to these wars. So Vindman is a parasite, and he's been up, and he was questioned by Jordan and Nunes about who he reported and gave material to. And he disclosed he gave it to Kent, the State Department bow tie wimpified guy, and he gave it to somebody else in the intelligence community. And his lawyers and Adam Schiff have stopped and interrupted the questioning and told Vindman, do not disclose the name of anyone, do not disclose the whistleblower. And that has triggered Nunes and Jordan to say, wait a minute, if you're telling him not to disclose who he's given it to in the intelligence community, you're telling him not to disclose the whistleblower, then he has lied in his previous deposition when he said he did not know the whistleblower, because obviously he does know the whistleblower, because his lawyers are telling him do not answer that question, and Adam Schiff's telling him do not answer that question. So suddenly they've got this Vindman guy lying in his previous testimony or lying right now, but they're desperately trying to cover up this whistleblower, which we know is Anthony Eric Ciaramella, Ciaremella, Ciaramella, whose picture is up there. I think Donald probably put a graphic up there. This guy who was a CIA analyst who was brought in under Brennan. He was part of the Obama operations. Yeah, you see him pictured there with Hillary and Elizabeth Warren and Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi. That's Ciaramella. And apparently he was CIA under Brennan. And then Kelly, I think it was Kelly, who brought Ciaramella back into the National Security Council. And this kid looks like he's 19, 20 years old. He's never been in the military. I see this as a classic, very strange patsy situation unfolding here. But this entire proceeding of the impeachment is going nowhere. There's no grounds for it. It's a total goose chase, and I think the American people are waking up to it. It is going to blow back. You are going to see Jordan and others beginning to examine Schiff and force him. Schiff could be getting into a lot of trouble if it's found out that they've been working with this whistleblower and engineering this whole fraud as one of their tools. Again, as Attorney Barr said, this is the deep state, far left, doing everything they can out of desperation to hide themselves from their own criminal prosecutions for their abuse of power when they were working in government under the Obama administration. And I know this personally because I saw Eric Holder and Lanny Brewer and Hillary Clinton and Covington and Burling and Obama's administration and Robert Wolf of Union Bank of Switzerland, all of these people playing a part in the terrorist financing of ISIS in Libya and Syria. Edward Snowden was part of it. Brad Birkenfeld, the whistleblower, UBS, was part of it. Julian Assange was part of it. His WikiLeaks cables provided the key State Department communications. All of that is part of these ongoing crimes. That this Ukraine gate is simply a deception to try and lure people away from it. Jim?
Yep, that's right.
Thanks, Scott. I think you got all that right. Meanwhile, former U.S. Ambassador to Ukraine, Marie Yovanovitch, admitted Friday under questioning from Republican counsel she had been briefed about the fact that Hunter Biden was on Burisma's board, but did nothing about it. Hunter Biden, one of then Vice President Joe Biden's children, was named to a highly compensated board position in 2014 while his father was overseeing U.S.-Ukraine relations. A situation diplomat George Kent testified Wednesday presented a clear conflict of interest. Yovanovitch testified in response to questions from Stephen Castor before the House Intel Committee's second public hearing in the impeachment inquiry that she had been informed about the situation in her briefing documents for her confirmation hearing and had even been coached on how to respond but took no action when she arrived at her post. Castor. Right around the time the bribe was paid by an oligarch, Burisma undertook an effort to spruce up their board, and they added, I believe, the president of Poland and some other luminaries. Are you familiar with that? Yovanovitch. Yeah, I don't exactly know the timing of all this, but yes, I mean to the elements. Castor. And you know, one of the folks they added to the board was the vice president's son, Hunter Biden, which, you know, raises questions. Is he a genius on the corporate governance front? Is he a genius with the oligarchical systems and cleaning that up? or was he just added to the board because he's the vice president's son? Was that ever, a concern, or at least a perception of that concern addressed? Yovanovitch. As I said, I arrived in August of 2016, several months before the election and several months before President Trump took office, and it was not a focus of what I was doing in that 6-month period. Okay, said Castor, was the issue ever raised at all? Yovanovitch, not Castor. He was still on the board, I think, at the time. Yovanovitch here, my understanding from newspaper accounts is that he just recently left in 2019. I never met him, never talked to him, and I'm sorry, what was your question? Castor, he was still on the board when you arrived at post, and I was just wondering if at least the perception problem was brought to your attention as the ambassador. Yovanovitch, I was aware of it because, as I told you before in the deposition, there had been in terms of the preparation for my Senate confirmation hearings for Ukraine, there was a question about that and a select answer. So I was aware of it, yes. Representative Elaine Stefanik later noted that while Democrats on the committee had tried to suppress questions about Burisma, the Obama administration itself had prepared her to answer them for her confirmation hearing. Stefanik, the first time you personally became aware of Burisma was actually when you were being prepared by the Obama State Department for your Senate confirmation hearings. And this was in the form of practice questions and answers. This was your deposition. And you testified that in this particular practice Q&A with Obama State Department, it wasn't just generally about Burisma and corruption. It was specifically about Hunter Biden and Burisma. Is that correct? Yovanovitch, yes, it is. Stefanik, and the exact quote from your testimony, Ambassador, is, quote, the way the question was phrased in this model Q&A was, what can you tell us about Hunter Biden's, being named to the board of Burisma? So for the millions of Americans watching, President Obama's own State Department was so concerned about potential conflicts of interest from Hunter Biden's role at Burisma that they raised it themselves while prepping this wonderful ambassador nominee before her confirmation. And yet our Democrat colleagues and the chairman of this committee cry foul when we dare ask the same question the Obama administration was so concerned about. But we will continue asking it. Meanwhile, and this is stunning, star witnesses stared straight ahead with a blank look. Trump gloats, slams, shifty shifts impeachment show trial disaster. Representative John Ratcliffe tore into Adam Schiff's top witnesses on Wednesday. Representative Ratcliffe, a former U.S. attorney from Texas, destroyed the Democrats' pre-audition star witnesses. At one point, Ratcliffe asked Ambassador Taylor and George Kent to name the crime that President Trump committed on his call with President Zelensky. Representative Ratcliffe. So in this impeachment hearing today, where we impeach presidents for treason or bribery or other high crimes, where is the impeachment offense in that call? Are either of you here today to assert that there was an impeachable offense in that call? Silence. They sat in silence. They could not answer. It was devastating. At that moment, the Schiff show trial was exposed. Meanwhile, they continue unabated attacking Trump friends and allies. Roger Stone found guilty of 7 charges brought by the Mueller probe. Longtime political operative Roger Stone has been found guilty on all 7 counts of his indictment brought by Robert Mueller's special counsel. Charges including false statements in Congress, obstruction of justice, witness tampering, all related to statements about his efforts to contact WikiLeaks. Prosecutors allege Stone lied to Congress about his conversations regarding WikiLeaks with New York radio host and comedian Randy Credico. By the way, that would not have been under oath, who scored an interview with WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange in 2016 when he was avoiding prosecution by sheltering in the Ecuadorian embassy in London, and conservative writer and conspiracy theorist Jerome Corsi. During the 2016 campaign, Stone had mentioned in interviews and public appearances that he was in contact with Assange through a trusted intermediary and hinted at inside knowledge of WikiLeaks plans. But he started pressing Credico to broker a contact, and Credico testified he told Stone to work through his own intermediary. Earlier testimony revealed that Stone, while appearing before the House Intel Committee, named Credico as his intermediary to Assange and pressured Credico not to contradict him. After Credico was contacted by Congress, he reached out to Stone, who told him he should stonewall it and plead the fifth. Credico also testified during Stone's trial that Stone repeatedly told him to do a Frank Pantaglia, a reference to a character in The Godfather Part 2 who lies before Congress. Prosecutors said Stone had also threatened Credico's therapy dog, Bianca, saying he was going to take the dog away from him. Sounds pretty bad, Scott, but I'm skeptical. I think the whole thing was manufactured. Your thoughts?
Well, we see the deep state in all of its beta male averageness with Kent and Taylor, the two people that appeared last week. Career arrogant bureaucrats. Taylor, goes to West Point allegedly, and thinks that somehow is established him as someone to be respected. I watched the hearings with them, and I didn't like either of them. I thought they were devious and very slippery, but they were caught a few times by Jordan, and the Republicans are catching them. And that was a brilliant question. There is no evidence of impeachment, is there? There's no impeachable action here. Essentially, Donald Trump has known and discovered through his various informants, his various people who work in the military, the National Security Agency, the CIA, all of the areas of government, intelligence ops, State Department, including myself. He has been advised of these deep state operations involving Eric Holder and Landy Brewer and Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama and all these other parties in various episodes around the globe. Ukraine is coming out as the pustule boil that it is, and all of this poison is coming out. Trump has seen this for a while. He's been given this by General Flynn as well. That's why General Flynn's case is going to fall apart and Sidney Powell is going to have him exonerated. Covington and Burling has been named on that as having a conflict of interest. So General Flynn is going to be exonerated to come out. But what President Trump knows is that in Ukraine, Victoria Nuland and Barack Obama and John Kerry and Hillary Clinton and the whole cabal launched a coup d'etat and did the Maidan coup d'etat. They threw out Yanukovych. They had CIA MI6 backed snipers killing people. And they then took over Ukraine with all sorts of agendas, the largest of which was to pit against Russia. Russia stepped in and changed all that. Crimea went to Russia. Donbass, which was a native-speaking Russian area, separated because they weren't going to let their language and their Russian culture disappear. Again, these are thousands of years old, and these tribal shifts of populations and rules. This is not America. This is Ukraine and Russia and Europe and all of the steps. So Trump has known about this, and he specifically knew that Joe Biden had went over to Ukraine and exercised absolute corruption and injustice by stopping the attorney general who was dedicated to the pursuit of justice in Ukraine from investigating Burisma and investigating Hunter Biden, Joe Biden's son. And he kept away money from that. So the Democrats are desperately trying to flip it and make it look like Trump's getting the bribery, when all along the real truth is the Democrats are getting the bribery. Hunter Biden was getting the bribery in the form of $80,000 a month to ride the coattails of his father. Paul Pelosi Jr., Nancy Pelosi's nephew or something, or maybe it was a son actually. Paul Pelosi Jr. was, I think, on the board or involved there, as well as John Kerry's adopted son Heinz. And that's the real issue. That's what Giuliani went over to investigate, not for political purposes, because the walking dead Joe Biden doesn't have a chance anyway, but to investigate how the American country and the taxpayers and the world at large have been corrupted by these evildoers. And the new voting president in Ukraine was going to work with Trump on exposing that, not for political purposes, but for constitutional purposes. Our country was being treated like a slot machine in Vegas by Joe Biden and Barack Obama and the left. And that's all coming in now because we see Christopher Steele, the British MI6 spy, was in Ukraine writing intelligence reports back to the State Department officer who was in charge of Libya. This was during the initial takeover of Ukraine, I think it was. So MI6, Christopher Steele, has now been implicated because Judicial Watch did a FOIA request that demanded materials and intelligence and communications between Christopher Steele in Ukraine and all this stuff. And it just came out. The Duran did an expose on it. And I like the Duran. I think they're very smart guys. And I talk to them often. And they have done an expose on how Christopher Steele is wrapped up in the Ukraine intelligence cover-up and spy operations. And that was before they went on to Trump. This is back in 2014. So when they used Christopher Steele in the Ukrainian operation to run guns from Libya to Turkey to Syria, and all of that stuff was going on, they then tapped into Christopher Steele a second time to go after Trump in 2015, or I think it was before 2016. So Christopher Steele is now implicated both in the Ukrainian intelligence operations and cover-up and scams and scandals, and the going after Trump, of course, with the Russiagate. So that's the new revelation that the Judicial Watch FOIA request has yielded. Again, just the whole thing is beginning to smell like a dead, rotten corpse, as we know it is. But Democrats are in such schizophrenic, bipolar mental meltdown and denial that they are pulling their hair out, covering their ears and eyes, and are unable to digest this and understand it. That's why we really are on. We're not on the cusp. We are in a civil war, Jim. And Carl Bernstein and these others who've talked about it are just now talking about it. We've talked about it for over 2-3 years now, that we're in a civil war, because they were bringing this fight to us in the form of lies and corruption and impeachment, on false intelligence, on abusing their office in the White House and the CIA, abusing their office in the Congress, covering up real whistleblowers. So all of this, I think, is coming out. Go ahead.
I think you got that right, Scott, and there's more to confirm it. Meanwhile, insider leak is Facebook protecting the alleged whistleblower Eric Caramella. An individual working for Cognizant, a Facebook contractor, has come forward to disclose what they claim is a censorship campaign regarding alleged CIA whistleblower Eric Caramella. Cognizant first made headlines when an article by The Verge entitled "The Secret Lives of Facebook Moderators in America" was published, which disclosed the existence of thousands of human content moderators being employed by Facebook to comb through content manually. Here's an excerpt from the article. Over the past 3 months, I interviewed a dozen current and former employees of Cognizant and Phoenix. All had signed non-disclosure agreements with Cognizant, in which they pledged not to discuss their work for Facebook or even acknowledge that Facebook is Cognizant's client. The shroud of secrecy is meant to protect employees from users who may be angry about a content moderation decision and seek to resolve it with a known Facebook contractor. The NDAs are also meant to prevent contractors from sharing Facebook users' personal information with the outside world at a time of intense scrutiny over data privacy issues. But the secrecy also insulates Cognizant and Facebook from criticism about their working conditions, moderators told me. The individuals coming forward provided a picture of their work ID to show they are an employee of Cognizant and thus would be aware of internal Facebook content moderator and censorship requests. The individual coming forward provided a picture of today, I was contacted by a person who works for Cognizant, a Facebook subcontractor. The following is a series of lightly redacted screenshots, numbered in order and overlapping to show the full conversation. I have compiled the information the source provided and want to stress, as of time of publishing, not all the information has been verified 100%. The source wishes to remain anonymous and was limited in what they were able to disclose. Meanwhile, Democrats want to keep CIA leaker Eric Caramella anonymous till after impeachment. Then he'll be the toast of D.C., do all the talk shows, and land a huge book deal. And remember, as Don already showed, he's a buddy of Hillary Clinton, of Chuck Schumer, of Nancy Pelosi. I mean, it's outrageous. Let's be clear. There's only one reason Democrats want the anti-Trump CIA leaker to remain anonymous. They know the more you learn about Caramella, the more likely they lose. He worked with DNC operative Alexandria Chalupa in creating the Trump-Russia collusion hoax. He was fired from the National Security Council in 2017 for leaks and returned to the CIA. He worked directly under James Clapper. He worked and traveled with Joe Biden. He served in the Obama administration. He worked with John Brennan. He's a registered Democrat. Well, there's a guy with no bias or motivation to attack Trump unjustly. CIA snitch Eric Caramella filed a whistleblower complaint on August 12th over President Trump's July 25th phone call with Ukrainian President Zelensky, where the two discussed ferreting out corruption. This included talk on investigating the Biden crime family. Caramella was not on the call. He only learned about it, and his report was filled with inaccuracies. Meanwhile, very significant, a Democratic representative says he'll vote no on impeachment, reveals other Democratic lawmakers are quietly and privately concerned about the Schiff show trial. Democrat Representative Jeff Van Drew of New Jersey appeared on Sunday Morning Futures and told host Maria Bartiromo that he would be voting no on the impeachment unless there were proof Trump committed a high crime. Congressman Van Drew voted against the impeachment resolution that denied President Trump due process and gives Adam Schiff sweeping powers to control witnesses and evidence. Van Drew said impeachment is a very serious matter, and Schiff is disenfranchising millions upon millions of Americans who voted for Trump. Our founding fathers had vigorous debates of whether they would even allow impeachment in the Constitution. You don't disenfranchise voters. Millions upon millions of voters. Van Drew said voters choose their leaders in America. Maria Bartiromo then asked Representative Van Drew if he is hearing concern from red state Democrats about Schiff's Soviet-style impeachment process. There is some discussion among some of them Democrats, quietly, privately, of concern, certainly, Van Drew said. What I'm hearing out on the street from most people is they're kind of tired, they're kind of worn out, they're kind of bored, and they really want to move on. Here's a tweet about it. Congressman, Dems losing their appetite for impeachment. Voters choose their leaders in America. You don't disenfranchise millions of voters. Democrats are concerned about impeachment push. I imagine I'll be voting no unless there's something new. And then a cartoon that puts the case together. Adam Schiff, judge, jury, and executioner. Scott, your thoughts?
Well, I think any Democrat that has any hope of reelection or being treated sanely and intelligently and perhaps wants to stay alive, because this could get very ugly very quickly, decent, reasonable Democrats are going to vote against this sham impeachment, this total disgrace, because if they vote for impeachment, if they side with Adam Schiff, you're siding with corruption. You're siding with a Joe Biden, Hunter Biden scam, a pay-to-play pyramid scheme, a total act of corruption with Burisma, this company that was owned by the former Secretary of Energy or something in Ukraine, that was giving licenses to his own company to drill for oil and look for resources. So there's total corruption. And they got Hunter Biden on to aid and abet that corruption, which Joe Biden is happy to do. Hunter Biden also got, I think it was millions of dollars from China. So that's the real crime. That's the real issue. That's the real ethical exposure that the Republicans need to bring and say again and again and again. They need to bring this out constantly and berate, because Adam Schiff is shutting down the debate. He's interrupting Republicans. He's stopping their flow. He's stopping their rhythm. He's going on this this obstructionist position. But I think Democrats are going to slowly pull away from him, because they're going to see the American public are not going to tolerate it. They're not going to have any appetite. And when they come back to their town hall meetings in Christmas time, November, Christmas time, they're going to see an American public that is going to be, I think, frothing at the mouth, shaking their fist, and looking for blood, because this entire Congress has been a waste of time. They haven't, like Trump had said in a tweet, you're gonna prosecute and imprison Roger Stone for a process crime. Okay, if he was smart, he would have said nothing. If he was real smart, he would have said something very carefully and make sure it was absolutely the truth to the best of his knowledge. But you're going to try and imprison Roger Stone when you're letting Eric Holder and Lanny Brewer and Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama and Andrew McCabe and John Brennan and James Comey and these people who are actively undermining the Constitution, attempting treason and sabotage of a president, you're going to let them go without being prosecuted and investigated. I don't think that will happen. I think the Department of Justice under Barr and the Inspector General report eventually is going to be used to prosecute these people, but it isn't a timing issue. We have to remember the drama of this. There's Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. Act 3 is going to be in 2020. We're just in the middle, I think, of Act 2 right now, and it's going to shift over in the spring when Trump goes on the full-bore election, and most of these Democrats are not going to be able to stand up. That's also a danger. Like we've said before, Jim, I anticipate a Manchurian candidate scenario where they kill one of their own, they blame a Trump supporter, they blame some patriot, they blame some MAGA hat wearing guy, and they kill maybe Hillary Clinton, maybe Bill Clinton, maybe Pete Buttigieg. Maybe they'll kill Pete Buttigieg and call it an anti-gay Trump supporting guy. Buttigieg is gay. So I would not doubt any depravity by a Democrat. And the reason they do a Manchurian candidate assassination is because it is the only way that they can win, because that would guilt trip the American public into staying home, not voting for Trump or voting for a Democrat. I think that's the only way, and I can see it coming. I hope it doesn't, but I see it coming. Jim?
Fascinating, Scott. Completely fascinating. More. Stop the coup. Judicial Watch and Hugh Hewitt call for the Senate to end the impeachment absurdity by rejecting a trial. Judicial Watch and Hugh Hewitt have made respective calls for the Senate to reject out of hand any articles of impeachment against President Trump the Democratic House sends to the upper chamber because of the secret partisan way in which they have conducted the impeachment investigation. Hugh Hewitt on Meet the Press. Tom Fitton, Judicial Watch president, appeared in a Judicial Watch video posted Monday urging phone calls to the Senate demanding senators reject any impeachment articles. I would suggest you call your senators at 202-224-3121. That's the real number. Area code 202-224-3121 to shut down the impeachment. They can dismiss it out of hand. They should be telling the House right now they're not going to buy into an abusive coup attack on Donald Trump. Appearing on NBC's Meet the Press, he would observe the Ukraine controversy is in part based on disagreement with Trump using a back channel to Ukraine, Hugh Hewitt. I've read those stories. I imagine it would be Rudy Giuliani, a sacrificial lamb, but I'm doing my best to read all the transcripts. I have enormous respect for the Department of State. People know my son works there, and Mike Pompeo is a good friend of mine. So I'm trying to be very respectful of them. But what I see, I don't see any impeachable offense in the record so far. I don't even see an offense. I see a back channel that the State Department has hated since Harry Hopkins went to England for FDR in 34 and 40, since Scala was involved in the Cuban Missile Crisis, since Kissinger went to China. The State Department hates back channels. And when they blow up, like Iran-Contra, they blow up badly. But there's nothing illegal. It's a policy dispute. And so we're on the verge of a first partisan impeachment since 1868. And I don't think the American people like this at all, purely partisan vote in the House. That's what we're going to have. In the first two impeachments, there were concrete acts of break-in, of the Watergate, an affair with the White House with an intern, Monica Lewinsky, on which you had a date stamp, a time, and the American people understood. Not only is that not here, there is a compelling argument that what the president did is just what other presidents do. And I am persuaded by this. I don't think the Senate will be an impeachment. They're going to send an article over purely partisan vote. I don't think the Senate should take it up. I think they should reject the motion to proceed and never touch it. Otherwise, we will have this done again and again. Secret trying, secret hearings, ex parte contact, just a bad precedent. You know, detailed in a Washington Post column Sunday how the Senate could reject the articles of impeachment without holding a trial. You know, cited research provided by former Secretary of the Senate Kelly Johnstone, who actually has also worked for Republicans in the Senate. Johnston says a critical moment will arise as soon as any article arrive in the Senate, but before any substantive proceedings occur under a standing rules of the Senate. The Senate must approve a motion to proceed to consider the articles. And it is at that moment that senators, even and especially those critical of Trump for other reasons, should think of a future littered with partisan impeachments born of secret proceedings and abuse of the House minority's rights, as well as the rights of future presidents. Johnson imagined a scenario in which McConnell offered a measure to move forward, either with a full trial or something shorter, and a senator from either party objected. That would be McConnell's cue to shut the whole thing down. Under the rules, there would be unlimited debate until the leader files a cloture motion, he explained. That triggers an additional 30 hours, culminating in a vote. As you know, other than nomination, it takes 60 votes to end debate, even though it takes just 51 to adopt a motion to proceed. With 51 votes and the Reid rule, Johnson continued, McConnell could first block a filibuster on any motion to proceed and then move to dismiss any article of impeachment with a simple majority. This process of refusal by the Senate to approve a motion to proceed is how the Senate should flush articles of impeachment from the record as it stands today. Invite the House to begin again if it wants to, but using due process if it does, backed by a bipartisan majority. Also on Sunday, Senator Lindsey Graham, chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, said articles of impeachment would be invalid and dead on arrival in the Senate if the alleged whistleblower is kept secret and does not testify before the House. I consider any impeachment in the House that doesn't allow us to know the identity of the whistleblower to be invalid, because without the whistleblower complaint, we wouldn't be talking about any of this. Stating the process would be unfair if the person who brought the complaint does not have to face questioning. I consider any impeachment in the House that doesn't allow us to know who the whistleblower is, because without it, we wouldn't be talking about any of this. Meanwhile, Carl Bernstein, America in a cold civil war. America is in the middle of a cold civil war, and as a public impeachment hearings into President Trump move forward, everything is going to be judged politically in that context, according to Watergate journalist Carl Bernstein, who added, we all need to take a step back. You might think he's being reasonable and rational, but look at what he now says. We have overwhelming evidence the President of the United States conspired with his lawyer to undermine the electoral process in this country through the intervention of a foreign power, Bernstein told CNN Tuesday. It's a very grave charge, and there are a lot of facts that support that charge, to which I say bullshit. But nobody knows where the charges will go. As much of it will have to do with how Americans process information being presented, how the Senate will look at it, said Bernstein. The conventional wisdom is he would be acquitted in the Senate. I think it's time to put conventional wisdom aside. We don't know. Senators are very sensitive to the will of the people, and if the people in this country turn on these facts and this president, I think the Senate might as well. They understand the Constitution talks only about two specific high crimes, bribery and treason. He said, this is bribery. And the facts show so far real evidence the president tried to bribe the president of another foreign country to intervene in our election. That is a high crime. Basically, Bernstein has no idea what he's talking about. Bernstein added if the impeachment proceedings were held now in the Republican-controlled Senate, sure, he would be acquitted. These senators are also looking at the president's mental state, said Bernstein. There's concern among these senators about his temperament, his stability. It's no secret to any of us who talk to people in the Senate, and that dynamic too goes to the people of the United States. Scott, your thoughts?
Well, let's get something very, very clear. These people who are being brought up in Congress, this Kent and this Taylor and this Lieutenant Colonel Vindman, they are not talking or doing things on the weekend in their civilian time, at home, at their daughter's birthday party, at McDonald's, at a gay nightclub, wherever they're at. They are in official uniform. They are in official capacity working for the official United States government, paid for by the people of the United States. So what they are doing and what Trump has a right to find out, what the Congress has a right to find out, is question them about their official duties, the time they did it, when they did it, who they did it with, how they did it, why they did it, every detail of their performance as an officer of the United States military or in the United States government, as an employee of the United States government. Every single thing, every single word, every single keystroke is scrutinized by the commander-in-chief, the president of the United States, who's given authority under the Constitution to manage every federal agency, period. Every federal agency gets a budget and gets its mission by Congress. The president then executes that mission and budget, period. So these people who are, well, we're in charge of diplomacy. We, with the foreign interests of the United States, the foreign policy of the United States has been anti-Russia, fight Russia, blah, 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 for 40, 50 years. To hell with that. To hell with them. I'm sick and tired of these old men in positions of power with their vitriolic, senile obsession with Russia, which is not a communist country, their obsession with Iran, which is not a threat to the United States. We have been the threat and the destabilizer for 50 years around the world. Yes, we've got some tensions and conflicts, but you know what the big enemy of the United States is the robotic, two-dimensional Borg Chinese, the Chinese communists. They were the ones who overthrew Ellen Zhao in this recent election as mayor, which we are fighting in the courts. I want to have slides up there. If we don't have it this week, I want it next week. But I want these Chinese communists exposed because they have been undermining the election in San Francisco. They've been undermining California. Gavin Newsom has been working closely with them. Nancy Pelosi has been working closely with them. The Chinese are the ones pushing America into conflict with Iran and Russia. And these people who are facilitating that are working with Chinese agents. Senator Dianne Feinstein is one of them. So there's a lot to untangle in that, but the bottom line is Russia and Iran is not an enemy of the United States. Trump should know that. We've briefed him enough on this. And what we really see is this orchestrated power grab by people who think they're more than they are. Trump needs a Praetorian Guard. I think he's starting to get that. He's got a Marine Corps Reserve Operation Battalion activated. That needs to be implemented as Praetorian Guard. He needs to put them in plain clothes and put some smart officers and smart enlisted guys into positions as a cadre, as an investigation team, as part of an inspector general review, an inspector general appointed czar that goes in and ferrets out these whistleblower type leakers like the CIA Chummarella. He needs to go into all these agencies and kick ass and take names later, overthrow their desks, change the locks, whip them out, and change the entire complexion of the federal government and the federal agencies and these parasitic ticks that work in there, like Charamella and how many other Obama officials. This Vindman and all these other people were put in under Obama. I was in the Army when I saw it. They were doing a direct war on white heterosexual males. They were homosexualizing the military. They were doing all sorts of corrupt things. That's part of the reason they prosecuted me 30 days after I wrote a report on how changing the marriage and the gay policies in the military would cause a massive run out of the military by conservative moral soldiers from Kansas and Oklahoma and people who have been brought up as Christians. 1 month after submitting that report to the Pentagon and the White House, I got called in by my colonel, read the riot act, told to retract that, told to change it. I said I would not. because I did this at the Heritage Foundation. I did it at HHS under the Bush administration, and it is my duty as an officer in charge of the welfare, recreation, and morale of soldiers in my battalion, the 11th Psychological Operations Battalion. 1 month after I stood my ground, these bastards came and prosecuted me for 18100-1, making a false statement on a housing form because I allegedly filled the wrong line in or circled the wrong box. And Donna Shalala's nephew came after me. And yes, it was tied up with all this other stuff. Why? Because I was a whistleblower. I was banging walls. I was making noise. I was kicking people in the ass, including admirals and generals and colonels, telling them, why aren't we doing this? Why aren't we doing that? This is stupid. This is right. This is smart. This is not. They didn't like that. They didn't like to hear that because war's a racket. War's a moneymaker. We got cushy jobs. We got six-figure salaries. We're Booz Allen Hamilton. This is Dov Zakheim, the guy in charge. Oh, yeah, Dov Zakheim. You're the guy who's in charge of the Pentagon, too, with all that money that went missing, you son of a bitch. You know, all of this stuff started unfolding. So what we're seeing is the remnants of these rats, these worms, these termites being brought up to the sunlight, and they're reacting with the only thing they know, and that is government doublespeak and legal process crimes. But you know what? Trump can pardon everybody overnight, and I think he will before the election. Even if he's well, I don't think he will. I don't think he will be unelected, Jim. I think we will be in a civil war. I plan to go into my polling place with a big sign saying, vote Trump or there will be a civil war. I don't have a problem saying vote Trump or there will be a civil war because I will not allow this sort of tyranny and corruption to take root. I know the truth, and many others do, thanks to Don and the show. Jim?
I think you got it exactly right, Scott. Don, you want to add? Okay. Meanwhile, more reasons why they can't actually legitimately beat Trump. Here's a report from Dr. Ewan that Trump affect America's safest cities. Yesterday, I did a post on the good news ignored by the mainstream that in 2018, the United States had nearly the lowest violent crime rate in more than 3 decades, as far back as many Americans can remember, of 369 violent crimes reported for every 100,000 Americans. Violent crimes rate is a population-adjusted measure of incidents of rape, robbery, homicide, and aggravated assault. A message to millennials. John Roman, a senior fellow with Social Research Institute, NORC, at the University of Chicago, said, if you are under the age of 40, you've never been safer than you are today. Moreover, that's on the plus side. Even when they try to attack him on immigration, Obama deported nearly 2 million in his first 3 years. Trump has deported fewer than 800,000. The latest immigration enforcement data affirms something that would appear incongruous. Former President Barack Obama deported illegal aliens at a far higher rate than his successor. Roughly 1.8 million foreign nationals were deported from the U.S. for the first 3 years of the Obama administration. The Trump administration, by contrast, has deported fewer than 800,000 so far, according to the Washington Post. In 2012 alone, Obama oversaw the removal of nearly 410,000 people. Trump has yet to deport more than 460,000 in a single year. While the numbers seem like an anomaly given the Trump administration's laser focus on immigration, they largely reflect the demographics of the current border crisis. During the Obama administration, a much higher proportion of those apprehended were Mexican nationals, who are much easier to remove from the country than foreign nationals from non-contiguous countries. The current immigration crisis has been largely made up of family units from Central America. Children and family units from countries other than Canada and Mexico are much more difficult to process and remove because of U.S. immigration laws. Immigration crisis has also forced the Trump administration to divert Homeland Security resources to the U.S.-Mexico border, leaving the interior with less manpower. The result has been fewer deportations. However, the attainment of foreign nationals has reached record levels. Roughly 50,000 were jailed on any given day last year by the Immigration and Customs Enforcement, the highest attainment number in the government's history. Individuals are also being held for a longer duration of time than before. Immigration activists who once referred to Obama as the deporter-in-chief have not forgotten the 44th deportation record. But get this, they can't beat him in impeachment. They can't vote him out of office. What is their final court of last resort? Assassination. President Trump makes unscheduled stop at military hospital to undergo battery of tests for possible deliberate poisoning of food with time-delayed chemical agent. Food tester gravely ill. Medical staff at Walter Reed did not get a staff-wide notice about a presidential visit to the medical center in Bethesda ahead of Trump's arrival. According to that source, typically Walter Reed's medical staff would get a general notice about a VIP visit to the medical center ahead of a presidential visit, notifying them of certain closures at the facility. That did not happen this time, indicating the visit was a non-routine and last minute. This action was initiated by the sudden onset of symptoms experienced by the president's food tester, who was reported stricken with such severe symptoms. You can mute Don if you like. Urgent medical tests were conducted on that person while the president was diverted to Walter Reed for a priority medical examination involving a battery of chemical tests. The president's motorcade drove to the medical center unannounced, with reporters under direction not to report the movement until they arrived Saturday at Walter Reed. A separate source familiar with the situation described Trump's visit as abnormal, but added that Trump, 73, appeared to be in good health late Friday. Alex Jones told Natural News he believes the incident may have been a deep state attack using an exotic chemical poison with a delayed activation signature. He underscored the importance of people understanding that we are in a climate of civil war, and this kind of attempted poisoning is par for the course, historically speaking, when they want to take out a leader and make it appear to be death by natural causes. InfoWars had previously reported Roger Stone survived an attempted poisoning, and deep state operatives who had infiltrated the White House were poisoning the president's water in an effort to impair his cognitive function and energy. In 2018, a Secret Service agent traveling with President Trump in Scotland died from a stroke, USA Today reported. A Secret Service agent traveling as part of President Trump's security detail died Tuesday in Scotland after suffering a severe stroke. The agent, a 19-year veteran of the agency, suffered a stroke on Sunday and was treated in Scotland. However, Microwave's Millie Weaver reported today that the agent who died was also a food tester for the president. Don, I know you're right. We need to take a break right here. All yours, my friend.
Right quickly, just got to say thanks for watching Truth with the News. November 19th, first hour. Come on back for the second hour. It's going to be a jam-packed and it's revealing. We did about Carmilla. So thanks so much for watching, you folks.